Okay,
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
that's okay.
Got it.
Got it. So we started out about, Kathy, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. We started about 6 years ago by thinking about a community that would be a way to bring people together who were neurotypical and neurodiverse. My brother lived in a community called L'Arche. It's located in Haverhill, Mass. There are 5, actually, as of this past month, 5 residences there. And it is a community, ecumenical, spiritually based community for people with and without disabilities to live together. And it's an international organization. At 19, I was in the position where I had to choose my brother's home, where he was going to go. And I remember looking at group homes, and I remember being horrified at 19, telling myself, my parents will kill me if I let him go here. And we were blessed to be able to find L'Arche. So that kind of inspired my thinking about what we could do about a community. And then Sarah had the idea.
Well, I've been thinking about community. I went back to my grandmother, and she was elderly, and her friend lived way down the street, and she couldn't see her. So I thought, wouldn't that be nice to build a little group home for her so she could have a wing and her friend could too, and they could get together. And that's developed into thoughts about an artist community. And then my daughter, I adopted my daughter, and then now I'm into the disabled community and trying to find good places for these kids to live. And my daughter right now is in Western Massachusetts at Berkshire Hills Music Academy. And they have a dorm, which she can stay in right now, but she will eventually have to leave because then she can't stay there because she will become too old. So thinking that, I'm concerned about where she's going to go because I'm an older parent, and now is the time to plan for her.
So one of the things that we really thought about, and one of the things that kind of inspired my early thinking was, I taught at Salem State, and thinking about the college setting where we have—
Can folks mute themselves, please?
Thinking about where we have, somebody can't hear.
I'm going to mute everybody, and then I'm going to, Jody and Sarah, you unmute yourselves.
There.
Okay,
can you hear us now? Yeah. Okay. So we really were inspired by, I was inspired by the variety of housing available to college students. When you come in, you're a freshman, the colleges presume you really aren't capable of living on your own without a lot of supervision. Then as we progress theoretically in our ability and our independent living skills, we get to move on to more independent housing. What Sarah and I really thought a lot about was the idea of a neighborhood, that it wasn't just about having a space where there's a group home or 2 group homes near one another. We're thinking about a neighborhood. And we were thinking specifically, not just about a neighborhood that is designed for people with disabilities, but designed to include people with disabilities very intentionally. So these are some of the things that we came up with as our 5 pillars of Kinship Inspired Neighborhood. Do you want to take some?
Are we going to go with the first one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the first one of our pillars is foster community connection within the neighborhood and its greater community. And the whole idea of this neighborhood is it would be close to a walkable downtown area, close to transportation, but the neighborhood itself would have enough housing in it and people in it that they could commune to. It would be inclusive within the community as well as going out into the community.
Right. Yes. So it would be a neighborhood. One of the important features is it wouldn't be gated. So this isn't
right.
We do not envision a gated community. Actually, just back up just real quickly. I know you can read, so I hate to read too much to you. But we're really thinking about, and it's a big mouthful, a very intentional, multi-generational, neuro-inclusive, net zero energy, residential community neighborhood. And it would be inspired by, this is a draft of our first flyer, but it's really more inspired by some co-housing practices that we think would suit a neighborhood like this. So the other things that we're thinking about have to do with really things that would encourage engagement between and among the people who live in that neighborhood. And we can share slides. But the biggest thing that I think that Sarah and I think makes it different is that under that pillar 2, the words that aren't there are that they would share engagement around an area of interest. So it's not about someone's identity per se as someone with a disability or someone who is a senior or someone who may
Is elderly
or LGBTQ or whatever. It transcends someone's identity and really looks at what someone brings people together around their interest. Do you want to do 3?
So it's common interest.
Yeah.
Interest having an inventory.
Yep.
Okay. I actually am going to read it. Enhance housing options and an inventory for people to secure a place to call home. And in this neighborhood, our thoughts went to what kind of people do we want to come live in the neighborhood, and what kind of housing would they want to be in? And especially our kids with disabilities like certain kinds of house. Some kids like to be with a group of people. Some kids like to be just in apartments, or they need shared living. And also we'll have elderly. Do they want to have a 1-floor living space? Are there going to be small families? They may want a 3-bedroom house. So what we've done with this concept in this neighborhood is to provide a variety of housing types and dwellings to accommodate different kinds, a neurodiverse, multi-generational group of people.
Cool.
Okay.
Kathy, would you mind going to the next slide, please?
Okay.
Thank you. So this one's easy. Concept 1, multi-generational, neurodiverse. I don't think anybody has questions about that, but if you do, certainly let us know later and we can speak to that. We can go to the next slide, please, Kathy.
Okay.
So before we go any further, we know that people are going, oh my God, what about DDS? Oh my God, how are we going to do that? DDS won't allow us to do that. Would they be able to get their funding? What about their agency providing? Who's going to do all this stuff? I can say that I did have a meeting with our regional director here in the Northeast proposing this model, and she was favorable toward the model because, as she said, we're not developing it specifically to segregate people with developmental disabilities. Rather, we're developing a neighborhood to address housing for all kinds of people, and it would include people with disabilities. So because of that, it really kind of transcends all that stuff that Kathy read earlier. We really are this is a way we're not trying to get around it, but this is why this would be a viable option. Do I have it in writing? No. Will I get it in writing? Yep, I'm gonna.
Yeah. And what happens here is that there seemed to be an opening to allow maybe a group home with some kids, and then maybe 5 houses down having another shared living home.
Right.
And maybe across the common, there would be another shared living or apartment, which would have places for kids with disability. So they could be close together,
Right.
sharing a common interest that they like, that they share together in their community. And we also have a very large community center where the people could join together and gather.
And congregate. So,
Okay.
Kathy, would you mind sharing the next slide?
Okay.
Thank you. So this is just a sample of something that in our research, we've been looking at all kinds of research about housing and who has it and who doesn't, and a lot of people don't. One of the things that there's this concept of missing middle housing. And I don't know if you guys, how well you can see it, but we'll share this with you. In the center, you'll see that there's different types of housing that is considered missing middle housing. And over the past decade or decades, we should say really, we've gone from having these kind of single ranch family houses in the 50s to the McMansions kind of stuff that we have now, are very, expensive high rises. And the stuff in the middle doesn't exist. So our project, Kinship Neighborhoods, we really want to look at incorporating all different kinds of dwellings, which allows for diversity, and that they would be dwellings that would be compatible in scale. So we're not looking at, one giant house.
Right.
We would look at something that would be a little bit bigger to accommodate, say, 4 people. But the biggest difference between what we're proposing is that there's a very strong intentionality of diversity, that the residents themselves are diverse, they represent diverse populations, and they're gathered again around that common interest.
In a very diverse neighborhood with diverse dwellings.
And
with
you're going to
different
see that
sizes.
too.
And we're going to show you that.
Yeah. Kathy, do you mind the next slide?
All right.
Showing the next slide, thank you. So this is just a kind of concept on the dwelling diversity. Sarah?
Okay. What I've done is I began to actually consider square footages for different types of homes that people could live in this community. And we've come up with different dwelling types, and you can read the list. There's 4 bedrooms, 3-bedroom homes, 3-bedroom on 1 floor for people who need 1 floor living, 2-bedroom townhouses, 2-bedroom cottages, 1-bedroom cottages, an apartment building with 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom units, and a large community building, which is set in the middle to allow all of these people to access it and to engage and have relationships and to also get together for their common interest. And the one that we kind of developed this beginning idea around was music, because my daughter is very musical. She's at a musical academy, which is vocational life skills, and music is her life right now. And there's a whole group of people in that area that do it also. So, and they're all going to need housing because they're all getting older. And this is a live forever type of place, which is just sort of developed as the years have gone on. So in thinking about this, we thought that if we provided these different kinds of housing dwelling types, we would get different kinds of people moving into the neighborhood, and it just allowed for diversity.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Actually, one of the things we haven't said is that Sarah's an architect.
Yeah.
So this is, this isn't just because we were, you don't want to see my drawing. My drawing was, chicken scratch on a piece of paper. So this is Sarah's drawing, and she can talk
like
a little bit more about it, but no, it's yeah, this is her rough sketch, but she's got it all mapped out and measured out.
Yeah.
So you go ahead and explain what you did.
Okay, what I've done is I have an idea, it's just an idea concept to develop this project on a scale so people can really look at it and understand the acreage involved, the land use involved, and how it would come in off a street. You can develop this model any way you want, and it would really depend upon where you put it on the land. But basically, if you look at the bottom, that's the main street, and then you've got your little U-shaped driveway, which goes all the way around. And I placed houses on each side in more of a neighborhood type of concept, rather than having any kind of go around the outside. There's going to be sidewalks, there's going to be garages. I didn't draw it in yet, but what I've done is, you can see where the community house is, and it's going to have a little extra parking. But on the right side, I started with a 3-bedroom, I think that's a 3-bedroom house. I went to an apartment. There's a 3-bedroom, one story. There's a 4-bedroom. There's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom cottage. So I intermixed everything. So you'd have that kind of placement of different types of people in different areas in that community. This is just a rough sketch, and it's just an idea. Everything's drawn slightly to scale. It's based, and if you look at the dotted line that kind of goes through, there's 4 squares. That's 4 acres. And that shows you the extent of the land needed or wanted, or that can be used. And it goes a little bit over the 4 acres. So you can see what we're working with for acreage. And the housing right now will support 45 bedrooms on 4 acres.
Which is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. That's like 10 people per, that's, and so this is just an idea of how that can work. It's not the final solution.
Yes. Kathy, would you mind the next slide, please?
All right.
Thank you. Concept 3, looking at net zero energy, really trying to, a lot of and I know somebody in the chat said something about Treehouse, and yes, Sarah's actually been to visit. So,
I know Treehouse.
So we're familiar with a bunch of different co-housing models, and while this is not a traditional co-housing model, a number of them do focus on sustainability and energy, and so this is definitely one of the things that was in our mind, and I'm going to let Sarah take this one.
Yeah, we were thinking, I mean, because we want people to live here for a long time, and we know that we're in a climate crisis. And so thinking ahead to that, we wanted to prepare this community, this neighborhood for eventuality. So we, and also too, you can get a lot of funding through net zero energy work.
Exactly. Exactly.
To help build it.
Right. One of the things too that actually, Kathy, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I think you talk about it here, Sarah, in the next one about solar. And one of the things that's appealing to me, my son needed a kidney transplant 5 years ago. And the thought of, we were doing peritoneal dialysis at home, and if our power went out, we were in trouble. We were just going to be in trouble. And he needed it all through winter. And he's had a kidney transplant. He's doing great. But that really pointed out to me my reliance on energy. And that would be true for me. It would be true for anybody who needs that. It could be, but this really kind of speaks to ways in which we can
it really
better ensure that.
Yeah, we can better ensure that there'll be enough electricity, that you'll have enough heating, enough cooling. If you go through the list, I mean, we can site the building according to passive solar and super insulate, efficient windows and efficient appliances, and possibly geothermal heating and cooling, which is a whole new thing. And then obviously solar panels. You can even, if you have enough property, you can start to tap in. And actually there are solar farms being started now on a private level rather than public. Right. Especially out in the Pioneer Valley, which is where my daughter is. So these are all things going forward that will be an advantage to the neighborhood. Yeah. So somebody mentioned here maintenance and bicycles. There can be little outbuildings with bicycles, and you can add all that on.
I love seeing the comments are coming through. Well, what about a bike shop? And what about baking?
Of course you can.
And that is exactly what we're thinking. Yeah. So it really would depend. So we have this kind of a higher level thought about the model, but how people want to apply the model and where really depends on your interests. My son's a foodie, but before he's a foodie, he's a sports fanatic. Yeah. So when I build the one that he's going to live in, there's going to be stadium seating outside because that is going to matter. But there really are lots of possibilities. Yeah. So Kathy, do you mind showing us the next slide?
Yeah. And the whole idea on this was to create these neighborhoods around that kind of interest that people will move in that have that interest. And for my daughter, it's the community house with the piano and the drums and the music thing. So, but you can have it with bikes, or you could have it with gardening, or you could have it with cooking.
And it's those things that we started to think about, that thing that when I have been able to watch my friend Annalie play piano, who is a phenomenal, Sarah's being honest, she is a musician. Yeah. And she is joyful about her music. And for those of you who are musicians or artists in the audience tonight, or someone who is, if it's your thing, it's the thing that makes you go. It's the thing that makes you happy. And those are the ways in which people are going to come out and be together. That's where we're going to find how we're going to build relationships. That's how we're going to find our circles of support, is by having things that are in common with people. So we really, when we talk about an intentional community, we're really thinking about a group of people who've chosen to live in a neighborhood together on the basis of a common interest. And when we're talking about co-housing, we're not talking about a traditional co-housing model, because a lot of co-housing models are more about the people wanting to live in co-housing as opposed to wanting to come together around a specific interest as much as we're talking about. The things that we've really adapted are the community house concept, really having a gathering space where musicians are going to be able to jam, and the neighbors aren't going to call the cops because the musicians are all other musicians living there, or people who say, yes, you know what, I like music and I can tolerate that. Yeah. Yes, of course, there'd be quiet hours, and the community can decide that. But
Yeah.
there's the sense of connection of the residents based on that shared interest. And that's where that connection comes from. And choice. Not everybody's going to want to live here. Not everybody's going to live there. And that's okay, because it's not for everybody, but it should be an option. Kind of like at the buffet. I really like to know that I have different protein choices, not
Right.
just one.
And it's also opening up choice for our kids,
Yes.
because right now they don't have many choices. So this might be a way to develop the opportunity for them to choose where they want to live and how they want to live.
The other piece I will add to this as a little side tangent is if you have a person-centered plan, your person-centered plan is going to say, this is what makes my loved one go. This is what is important to him or her. This is what is important for him or her. And that is going to really kind of inform the choice on where they might live.
Yeah.
So those are really, things that kind of inspired us. Kathy, do you mind showing us the next slide, please? All right, before we go any further, we're back to this. We know what you're thinking. It all sounds kind of weird. Are we talking about a commune? No. Who's going to own the houses? We're thinking about that, but it may really vary depending on each neighborhood and how it decides it wants to develop. Who's going to make the rules? Again, it really could be based on bylaws or some kind of value system or structure like that, that people would buy into just the way you would buy into a condo.
We haven't worked out the governance yet.
And the governance can vary.
It can vary from place to place, and depending on how you want to do it.
Could it work for your loved one? I think so. I mean, I think it could work for somebody who is currently receiving residential services 24/7, because they would still need residential services. They would be able to get a provider agency, could rent one of the bigger homes, and that could be a group home.
My daughter gets 24/7 care residential, so she's going to have to be in a home that will provide those services. And so that, for me, dealing with DDS has always been an issue, and I think that this scheme will work for her.
I think so. And who's going to pay for it? We're working on that. We are working on that.
We're working on where the money comes from.
We're trying to think about ways to tap into philanthropy, to tap into public subsidies, because of course we want this to also be affordable to anyone who wants to live there. So if we can figure out the model whereby people can live, sorry, I'm I'm distracted by the chat. Sorry.
Been working on this.
We've been working on this for a
long
while.
time.
But we're working here on the North Shore. There's Harbor Light Community Partners, and we have some connection and communication going on with them.
We've just heard about some more developers out in the Pioneer Valley, which we're going to go to.
We have a meeting on Wednesday
with the administrative people in South Hadley, which is where this would
in the town
South Hadley, where this project we hope will.
That's kind of our first one. We think that's going to be the first one. So the one on the North Shore would probably be after that. We'll see who's going to work faster.
I don't know.
We'll see. But that's kind of where we're at with that. And Kathy, do you mind? I think this is our last slide, and then we can stop talking. We don't have all the answers.
We don't have it.
No. We're committed to diversity in neighborhoods. Where on the North Shore, Deb says, I'm thinking Newburyport or Ipswich. And one of the things that we learned from Kathy the other day, because she knows so much, it's ridiculous, is that really what we're talking about is, in the housing world, it's called an infill or cluster housing. And so one of the things Sarah and I have both done is kind of look at Google Maps and look at land and look at property that's commercial property not being used. That's what we're looking at, not because I want it to be repurposed into a big apartment building, but because I want to raise it and I want to use the land there or whatever. So we're trying to look at some different options. I think about, on the North Shore, I think about Newburyport and Ipswich, because it is, it's they both have walkable downtowns. They're small enough. They're big enough, but they're small enough.
Yeah.
You can be where everybody knows your name. You can be where people know, and you come in and your coffee's there and people get who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two communities. It did come up to me the other day that there's an area in North Beverly where there was some Coast Guard housing. And so it's owned by the city of Beverly, I think, has jurisdiction right now. But there's like 8 different houses that could be repurposed to be kind of a cluster neighborhood. So we're really interested in doing this. Again, really focusing on what people are interested in, because it's nice. I just think about my experience and my son's experience in high school. He went to Masco. It was great. And the reason he had the friends he had was because he was included in the things he was interested in.
Mm.
He was interested in sports. So he hung out with the football team and he did work with them, and he made friends with people who he had common interests in and common interests with. So I think that's really important. One of the other things that I'm talking at warp speed, but it's the socioeconomic status that I think is really important as well. We really don't want this to be just for families who can, quote, afford to buy a piece of property for their kid. We really want to make sure that because housing in general in the Commonwealth right now is so expensive, it really is pricing out young families. So this would be an opportunity for a young family to potentially move into a neighborhood like this, where they can have their kids and the kids can run around and
they can run around,
and everybody can really kind of be in that old fashioned kind of safe, connected. I'm very nostalgic and idealistic. Sarah's practical. Talk to her. But that's what I envision. That's what I really want. I remember here in my neighborhood, I live in Middleton, and my kids could go out. I mean, there are only 4 houses where I am. So they would just run around the neighborhood, but they were safe.
Right.
And we knew that we could, let them do that. I understand that that's not the world we live in all the time. And I get that. But what was really nice about it was that the kids, we could rely on each other. To watch our kids. We could rely on each other not to give them too much junk food, because one of us would text the others and say, they were just here and had candy, give them nothing.
Yeah.
Or, they're all in my yard, don't worry. Or I'm going to give them all of this. And we even, in my neighborhood, we're weird. My neighbor the other day said, I'm making tacos. Can I, borrow some hamburger? I'm like, okay, I got some frozen,
But it also relates back to where my grandparents lived, and they lived in a town of 700 people, and he was the town doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother lived with my mother and my grandparents and my grandfather's mother. And so she was getting dementia and having trouble. And so one day they got a phone call and they said, well, she's over here in town. Can you come and get her? So it's kind of like people knew people,
right,
and watched out. And we're hoping that neighborhood will take that on, that same kind of community,
looking out for
each other. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're done.
Are we done? Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'd like to open up the chat, and I think you saw some of these as you went, but I'm just going to read these out as we go.
Sure. Yeah.
And that way, I think we can mostly continue with the recording because it won't be identifiable to any specific person. If somebody does not want to be on the recording, please turn your camera off. Okay. Will the slides be shared?
Yes.
Okay, we can do that. All right, I think you may have touched on this, but the question was, is any part of this envisioned to be appropriate for people who require 24/7 support? And I think you touched.
Yes. Yep.
All right, I'm going to I am going to skip over a question that was just direct to me. Okay, Kathy, you asked about, has there been progress towards assessing possible locations? I think that was touched on. Treehouse.
Yeah.
Locations are still kind of,
They're still up in the air. We've been talking to people out in South Hadley, and I've gotten some clues as to where to go and who owns what properties. In Ipswich, I don't know if we've kind of looked yet. So
Newburyport was really my first on my list. And that when I met with Kelly Lawless here at DDS, when I said Newburyport at Ipswich, she said, "Oh, Newburyport's nice," and I went, "Oh, okay." So we'll see if she has any insight.
You know, at the end of the day, I think these things are largely driven by where you find the land.
Right.
It is, and we're looking for a place, especially in South Hadley, that is walkable near the village center, the town common, near transportation, which is really important to DDS and all that. But it's also important to the people who live in the neighborhood and don't drive, and that they can walk downtown. So that's where we're trying to locate the property that I'm looking for. And there happens to be a giant golf course there, which I'm hoping that we can talk to them. So.
Okay. Somebody just mentioned dogs as another shared interest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sure.
Does net zero allow access to additional subsidies or funding sources?
Oh, yes. Yeah. There's a lot provided these days for all of that.
Someone mentioned that outdoor recreation, such as a rail trail, jogging, biking, and gardening, is also a possibility. Bike shop with maintenance lessons, farmers market, etc.
All good ideas.
Someone commented the model could be applied to a single building mixed-use community for a more urban setting.
Yes, it can.
Somebody said baking in the central building.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
thought about that too.
We were going to put a kitchen in. Yeah, you can put a kitchen in there and have cooking for large people.
Somebody commented on 2 community buildings, one to be, less stimulating.
Okay. Or it can be connected. You could have a
We did think about some quiet space in the community building, so it wasn't like one giant hall. But
And somebody mentioned the MBTA multifamily zoning overlay district programs.
Right. Yeah.
Communities that reside along the MBTA are required to have at least one zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right and meets other criteria set forth in the statute. You could present this to communities contemplating this.
Yes,
right, exactly.
Thank you.
How far in the process are you? Land, funding, time frame?
Okay, so we are talking to some important people in South Hadley on Wednesday, and we're going to ask them what we think that we should be doing next. I have talked to some people out there, and they've given me some heads up on land. We've got a developer, which we think we probably have to go and talk to a developer who's done this before, has experience getting funding, and also building projects like this. So we're on to those next steps now.
So if your child does not have housing priority 1, is this an option?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. How long have you been working on this?
10 years.
We've been working intensively since about February on this.
Yeah. We've thought about it a couple of times.
Right. We've thought about it through the years, and then COVID came in and our kids kind of graduated and went different pathways. And now they're getting old enough. Now we have to think about seriously about housing for them. And so we've come back to it, and we really started
February.
Yeah, February.
So we started in February.
And what we did is we took some classes online, and we did a lot of research into what was happening in other states, what's happening here, what's happening with the laws, just to get some substance to our arguments and our thoughts.
Right.
Okay. The question was, what if more people prefer the North Shore first?
Help me find some land, people. Help me find some land. Let's go.
We'll do it up here.
Ipswich is near many day programs. Someone else said it has a large, wealthy main employer, EBSCO.
Yes.
What about Southeastern Mass? Possibility to integrate seniors in need of support and or housing, which is also an extremely underserved community.
That's part of what
It's
we're intending. That
those,
is
yeah.
the intention.
Part of,
Here.
yeah, elderly house, there'll be some elderly housing.
Yep.
Have we thought about being near an area that could provide employment opportunities?
Hopefully in a walkable area. That's kind of what we're thinking. You know, if we're, and I think for Sarah and I both in our kind of respective neighborhoods that we want to develop, we
Yeah.
both want them in someplace walkable
Right.
because that's important. I can imagine, I don't know if somebody would want to put it somewhere else, but you know, again, putting it in proximity to where you can access things, the bank, other people, resources,
Small
groceries,
store, yeah, grocery, yeah,
work,
yeah.
and the tea, potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, Cummings Foundation is up that way. Just read
Excellent.
about how they run nonprofit assisted living.
Yes. I just, Bill Cummings, I just
Yep.
read about him, and yeah, he's done a lot with this. So any help on that would be, would
Yeah.
be helpful on that, but that's somebody we could talk to.
Yep.
Love this. What's an expected wait list? I think that's a little early to answer.
We'll take your name.
We will absolutely, you have our email, so we'll keep
Yep.
in touch.
Yeah, keep in touch.
Time frame.
Well, it's going to be at least 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot that you have to go through. It could be shorter than that, but you have to find the land, you have to find the developer. We got to get it, you know, get the permits.
You gotta
all
get
that
the money.
stuff, and the money, and you find, yeah,
We're going to get the money.
yeah. So those things all take a little time before you can actually get to a point of actually going into the ground and building.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping 3 years.
3 years. That's kind of what Bethany said
Yeah.
too.
Criteria to live there.
I think
Criteria.
it depends on the neighborhood, I would guess. If you feel like you want to live in a neighborhood where, you know, the common interest is anime, that's where you want to live. And if you wanted to live somewhere with there's people playing music
and art,
and
doing
art,
arts, and
you know, and they might have their house painted pink
yeah,
because they're expressive and whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, if that works for you. So I think it would really depend on the neighborhood, on that particular community.
And I
So
just,
that's our vision.
as you were speaking, something occurred to me, you know, that pivots off the discussion that we had last week, which is that when you're looking at funding sources, we talked about the one-stop process. There's going to need to be some serious attention paid around when you have public funds. It's tricky. You can't exclude people.
Right.
We talked about that tonight. Yeah.
And we would want to be really careful. That is one of the things that Sarah and I have talked at length about that, because we want people to be able to choose someplace, but not be excluded from someplace, if that makes sense. So it's not exclusionary. It's just that you're choosing it. So I probably wouldn't live someplace. I don't know where I wouldn't live. I don't know. I mean, if there was a gun range, I probably wouldn't live someplace where there's a gun range just because they scare me and whatever. But some people wouldn't live with dogs because they're afraid of dogs. I mean, I have a friend who won't come to my house because she's afraid of my dog. So I really think it's again, really focusing on the interest. Doesn't matter your race, your gender, your ethnicity, none of that. I don't think it should, but it's really trying to keep that concept around gathering around interest.
And I think, you know, I'm not trying to be a naysayer here, but I would talk very carefully with developers, just because I'm imagining a situation where you have somebody move in and they decide, I'm not interested in all of this, you know, getting along with my neighbor stuff, and I'm going to be a curmudgeon and everybody can just lump it. You know? And so, so that's that. I just want you to bear that in mind. I just want to go on to the next
Yeah.
comment. This sounds like a master plan with different developers building out for different needs. Are you partnering with various service providers as well?
No,
What service provided?
no
What-
service, like
Well,
for the ARC or something like that? Is
Oh,
that
no,
what you
no,
mean?
I-
Like a disability service provider?
No, I think of individual providers for the kids, right? That living there. Is that what you mean? So
I think that would depend on the people who are living there.
Yeah, there probably would be
Yeah.
different providers for
Yeah.
the different kids in different situations. I don't think that would be good to have one provider for the whole, everybody in one.
Right.
So,
And I think it becomes the, what kind of funding, it just as any place else you lived,
Mhm.
what's the funding attached to your person?
right. And will that
Exactly.
funding follow?
Right.
It's a
So
place
it's
to
only
use,
24
it's a place for your person to live where they can access their funding, but it is
Yes.
not a placement.
No.
No placement.
Right.
No. And that's kind of what we really didn't want to do that. And I personally, I think that, yeah, it transcends that.
Well, we're opening a door here, we know, into the DDS thing. So
Mm.
it's going to be because my kid does need 24/7. There are other kids that need 24/7.
Yep.
And that's priority one. And that's under the umbrella of DDS. And I want to open up that door and say, can she live in this house here and then have other kids down the street that she can go see? She can walk to where she goes to her academy. She can walk downtown and still get the services that she's getting now.
It is my impression at this time that that is the case. And I truly think with person-centered planning and with we're talking about 45 bedrooms in the space. We're not talking about 75% of a neighborhood being dedicated for people with developmental disabilities.
No,
We're
it's not
talking
gonna be
about a
that.
neighborhood that has an interest, a thread of interest that we're trying to get people to come together around so that there's some natural connectedness, and it should be open to everybody.
Yeah.
And, I would interject the other point I made the other day, which is that DDS starts getting the wind up when you get over 25% of
Right.
Yes.
residents being people with intellectual developmental disabilities. So if you're talking 45 bedrooms, you're talking about 11 or 12 people.
Exactly.
IDD.
Right. Yeah. And
So
we've got the space for them all. I mean, there's lots of,
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just comment about that, that doesn't stop a family from buying there that has an 8-year-old
Right.
child with a disability.
Exactly.
Right.
I
And
have
using Section 8
Yeah.
and
Right.
all of those things that can come into play. So
Right.
yes, there's a whole bunch of other things that can happen. Shared living, we kind of envision
Mhm.
maybe the townhouses, they'd be shared living. And maybe an individual who may need some communal support, but not 24/7, might live in one of the small 1-bedroom cottages. I don't know. But that's a possibility.
It's whatever they can handle and do.
Right.
So the next person was, can we have a follow-up meeting? How about a land search committee in the North Shore?
I'm open to that.
Joni's open to
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Yes.
If your child does not have a P1, what's the funding model?
It probably depends on whether it probably would be a combination of things, and it would probably depend on what
needs they
What the needs they have. and where they,
And it could come from the proprietary. Yeah.
it could come from a bunch of different places.
So
That's
am
kinda
I
that's what I'm
correct
thinking
in
it
assuming that what we're talking about is a place to live
is. Mhm.
where you would access the same funding stream that you're able to access anywhere?
Yes.
But the idea
Yes.
is that it is a more
Yeah.
friendly, less isolating place to use those resources.
Yes.
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 And again, that whole facility, to me, I just think that if you have you have your best friends that you love to go and do whatever with, you're going to talk about carpentry, you're going to do carpentry, you've got somebody you can just talk for hours about something you're interested in. Now you're going to develop friendships and relationships. Now you're going to have more opportunity and more inclination to kind of communicate with somebody else. Do you have to come out every single day? Sarah and I were discussing this. I'm an extrovert.
And I'm an introvert.
And so we were talking about that. And no, the idea isn't, no, introverts don't have to be out there, 24/7 participating. Nobody has to do anything. But by virtue of knowing that your neighbors are all kind of interested in what happened in the Red Sox game last night, now you've got something that you're going to walk around and you can talk to each other about. And that might facilitate something else. So we know we have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. We know the pandemic has done us major damage. We really want to be intentional about ways to try to facilitate bringing people together.
And we want to it's multi-generational, so all those generations can interact together. You're not isolating the elderly away from the little people. No. Everybody can do that and it actually enhances everybody's life.
Yeah.
So I want to pick up the pace a little here because we've got 11 minutes left and 13 more questions.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Okay. Dino, I'm going to answer your question myself. Can 40B come into this plan as well? Yes, it could.
Yes.
It depends on what kind of capital stack the developer puts together.
Right.
Have you thought about sharing your ideas on a national level?
Yes, we'll take it out nationally.
Sure.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
We're
doing this model because you can take it anywhere.
That's
offline. Jody and Sarah, we should talk about the First Place Global Leadership Academy meeting in Arizona in October.
Okay.
Okay. We in our school system have spent years getting our daughter connected to our home community. As excited as I am about this type of housing, I'm concerned about moving her to another community, such as Newburyport. How have others managed this, or should I ask in another forum?
I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
Because we live in Middleton. My son is entrenched here in our tri-town area. But it's amazing. As they get older, they go out to other places.
Yeah.
And they meet other people, and they may start to interact in other places. So my son currently has a part-time job at Merrimack College. And so part of the reason I thought Newburyport and Ipswich is it's not too far for him to still maintain that. But yeah, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine when you're, I don't know how old you said your child was, 13 or something.
Yeah.
But it's hard to imagine.
At that, yeah, my daughter was in a high school and in this area, and music was her thing. And so she went to this place out in South Hadley, and now she doesn't want to leave because she has found her tribe. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's done her music. That's what she wants to do. And she's doing well.
There.
And she has gigs. She's making a little bit of money, going out. So
she's a professional musician.
So next question. Any expectation of this model in the Brookline area or Lexington? The person who asked that, I'm going to suggest that you reach out to the people running something called Invictus Forever in Framingham that might be a bit closer. They have acquired land around an old Catholic high school that they are building out community programs, etc. And there may eventually be some housing associated.
Nice.
I don't know what to do with the thing that just says for funding reasons. I need a question.
Okay.
I know of 17 acres in Essex, but would need road, etc. I can email.
Okay.
Please do.
Sure.
Please do.
Will residents have an option to change to a different community? Right now, I'm just going to read through all the questions because the time is short.
Okay.
And I'm going to save the chat from tonight, and Jody and Sarah, I will email it to you.
Thank you. That'd be great. We'll respond to folks.
Okay. Will residents have an option to change to a different community? You mentioned philanthropy. Do you have any ideas how to navigate? Why is the state not leading the charge on this? I have a long
Kathy can answer that.
On that, but we need several hours for that.
That's a retreat.
And how do you find the money to build? Have you pursued planning grants? I have decades of experience in developing affordable housing. So is this imagined to be affordable through DHCD? That can take many years. Have you reached out to North Shore CDC? Ladies, you definitely need to be talking to Janice, by the way.
Janice, Janice, where are you? Oh,
There you are, Janice.
Icon
Architecture.
architecture. Hey,
There you go.
all right,
Yes,
hang
we'll
on.
chat.
Okay,
Yes.
we will.
What have been the thoughts about how the support model for the community? Do you have a partner for this? Is your organization going to be a nonprofit? Have you given any thought to the people in the community who may not be following agreed upon rules, who are being disrupted to the community, for example, partying, littering, etc.?
Yes.
Will these units be able to take Section 8? I don't see why they wouldn't.
Yeah, they should. Be able to.
What would be the buy-in for the neurotypical residents? How would we know they were all in?
Mm.
I am
Yep.
you ladies, you definitely need to talk to the people at the First Place Leadership Academy. They dealt with that by in intergenerational housing model, because they were in on the ground floor. So everybody who moved into that intergenerational model knew what they were getting into.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And we'll have a set of values and things that we plan to write up.
This sounds like a good option, but I would make sure DDS is very much involved, using their funding for participants.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, folks. Yeah, somebody else is interested in the meeting at First Place, if possible. Just so everybody knows, this thing at First Place is not cheap. I think it's like, I think the remote participation is $850, and going there is like $1,500 to $2,000. But they are kind of the think tank for people who are trying to do things like this.
Okay.
Oh,
We're going.
Okay.
Our next follow-up meeting, I know of a defunct shopping center in Orleans. Franklin County Redevelopment and Housing Authority is working on small downtown rebuilding, with all housing of all types having social service supports in all models. Would love to continue this dialogue. Do you know if Invictus is still going? I think you'd have to talk to them. I thought they were still up and running, but okay. Shopping center in Orleans was totally killed by COVID. All right, so that's where we're at. So the thing is, I think we have to proceed going forward on more than one track. This particular group was envisioned as something anybody could join in on at any time and start from the beginning with whatever housing models are being discussed. And I think we probably want to keep that way. At the same time, I think we would definitely want to look at working with Jody and Sarah on maybe having a different time once a month. And I'm Jody and Sarah, I hate to throw it back at you, but it's kind of your little red wagon. So what I'm going to say is, if you wanted to propose like a monthly Zoom, I could make sure that it gets sent out to all the same people who received the notices for this.
Okay.
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right. Monthly Zoom. Okay.
All right. Any final thoughts from folks? Oh, Town Council of Wakefield has a piece of town-owned land and would like to develop it in this manner.
Woo! Okay. Let's talk to them.
I think you guys should explore Google Docs, and people could then dump all their suggestions in there, if perhaps with some amount of structure, so that, you know, this page could, the spreadsheet could be for possible lands, which we will put in with, you know, who owns the land and the phone number.
Wow, that'd
We
be
will look
great.
this up
idea,
ahead
Kathy.
of time,
Great.
right? But anyway, I mean, let's use Google Docs and, you know, crowdsource your investigation.
Okay,
I
very
love
good.
Google Docs.
Very
So
good. Okay.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I know how to do Google Docs if you don't.
There are some similarities. Somebody mentioned there are some similarities to models we've been discussing. Again, this model would still come under the umbrella of those 6 models we discussed earlier. Remember, co-housing was one of the models.
Yes.
Right.
So this is simply a specific iteration of co-housing. So it very much fits under the framework. It's just somebody's actually talking about doing it.
Right.
And doing a blend of those models
Which-
that you talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
where we wanted to get to with this whole monthly process, is get to the point where people are starting to actually work on things. All right. So I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, I am going to save the chat, and I will send the chat out to everybody who was here. I will also send the recording from tonight. I think with the recording from tonight, I think I'm going to upload it to the AHP website under the housing models as an example of co-housing.
Okay.
So it would become an additional video, but obviously not a 30-second to 2-minute video like the other ones. This would be if you're okay with it, Jody and Sarah, what I would like to do is add in there your emails so people could reach you.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Okay. And then hopefully once I get all of that up, I will send out a notice. Our next meeting, I think I'd have to look at the calendar, but I'm going to be out of the country from August 24th until September 18th. So I believe we are meeting like August 15th or something. And frankly, I don't have anything planned for that because I want us to start at the beginning again in September. So if people are interested, and Jody and Sarah, you're willing, I might just ask you to come back next month. And sort of just give us an update, and we'll see what kind of structure we've got put together.
Okay.
By then.
We can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, folks. Thank you for coming, as always.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thank you.